On Thanksgiving Day, I had the imprudence to remind my daughter that she owed me $100,000. I lent her last October. She promised to pay it all back by the summer, but a year has already passed. To which I heard, "Why do you like to tease me so much? Everyone owes you something." I didn't borrow anything from you. My son and son-in-law, who were sitting nearby, looked at me askance. My husband squeezed my hand under the table and whispered, "Alison, don't ruin the holiday. We'll talk about it later." But it was my money, mine personally, not our joint money. I sold my parents' old house for $400,000 and dreamed that this money would become my financial cushion. My daughter was not calm. "You also lent Adam $2,000 in the winter. Why don't you remind him? You are my mother. A mother should give, not borrow." But I really gave a lot to my children. I helped them with the first payments when they bought their own apartments. I tried to keep quiet, but then Alison brought a turkey into the living room, began to cut it into pieces and treat everyone. When it was my turn, she said, "And I won't give you anything, because you don't look like that turkey. Let Adam give you half of his piece. You give him money behind my back and don't ask for anything in return. And you only lend me." No one stood up for me again. They ate the meat and were silent. I couldn't put anything in my mouth anymore. I got up from the table and went home. My husband called and was angry that I didn't pick him up, but I advised him to borrow money from my daughter for an Uber. I went to the cemetery to my mother's grave myself. She taught me to appreciate every penny. I still follow her wise advice. Always have $100 in your pocket or purse. You never know where life will throw you. Don't waste money on your husband. He won't appreciate it and may even be offended. If you want to give someone a big gift, buy something expensive for yourself first. Never spend more on others than on yourself. If you don't want to have enemies, don't borrow money. And my mother often said, "Daughter, you're a redhead, and redheads are lucky with money. Take your chance." Always remember, money loves those who respect it, and she respected it. I never spent every last dollar, always had a stash, and put 10% of it away every month in a piggy bank. But I really gave a lot to my children. I helped them with the first payments when they bought their own apartments. I tried to keep quiet, but then Alison brought a turkey into the living room, began to cut it into pieces and treat everyone. When it was my turn, she said, "And I won't give you anything, because you don't look like that turkey. Let Adam give you half of his piece. You give him money behind my back and don't ask for anything in return. And you only lend me." No one stood up for me again. They ate the meat and were silent. I couldn't put anything in my mouth anymore. I got up from the table and went home. My husband called and was angry that I didn't pick him up, but I advised him to borrow money from my daughter for an Uber. I went to the cemetery to my mother's grave myself. She taught me to appreciate every penny. I still follow her wise advice. Always have $100 in your pocket or purse. You never know where life will throw you. Don't waste money on your husband. He won't appreciate it and may even be offended. If you want to give someone a big gift, buy something expensive for yourself first. Never spend more on others than on yourself. If you don't want to have enemies, don't borrow money. And my mother often said, "Daughter, you're a redhead, and redheads are lucky with money. Take your chance." Always remember, money loves those who respect it, and she respected it. I never spent every last dollar, always had a stash, and put 10% of it away every month in a piggy bank. But I really gave a lot to my children. I helped them with the first payments when they bought their own apartments. I tried to keep quiet, but then Alison brought a turkey into the living room, began to cut it into pieces and treat everyone. When it was my turn, she said, "And I won't give you anything, because you don't look like that turkey. Let Adam give you half of his piece. You give him money behind my back and don't ask for anything in return. And you only lend me." No one stood up for me again. They ate the meat and were silent. I couldn't put anything in my mouth anymore. I got up from the table and went home. My husband called and was angry that I didn't pick him up, but I advised him to borrow money from my daughter for an Uber. I went to the cemetery to my mother's grave myself. She taught me to appreciate every penny. I still follow her wise advice. Always have $100 in your pocket or purse. You never know where life will throw you. Don't waste money on your husband. He won't appreciate it and may even be offended. If you want to give someone a big gift, buy something expensive for yourself first. Never spend more on others than on yourself. If you don't want to have enemies, don't borrow money. And my mother often said, "Daughter, you're a redhead, and redheads are lucky with money. Take your chance." Always remember, money loves those who respect it, and she respected it. I never spent every last dollar, always had a stash, and put 10% of it away every month in a piggy bank. But I really gave a lot to my children. I helped them with the first payments when they bought their own apartments. I tried to keep quiet, but then Alison brought a turkey into the living room, began to cut it into pieces and treat everyone. When it was my turn, she said, "And I won't give you anything, because you don't look like that turkey. Let Adam give you half of his piece. You give him money behind my back and don't ask for anything in return. And you only lend me." No one stood up for me again. They ate the meat and were silent. I couldn't put anything in my mouth anymore. I got up from the table and went home. My husband called and was angry that I didn't pick him up, but I advised him to borrow money from my daughter for an Uber. I went to the cemetery to my mother's grave myself. She taught me to appreciate every penny. I still follow her wise advice. Always have $100 in your pocket or purse. You never know where life will throw you. Don't waste money on your husband. He won't appreciate it and may even be offended. If you want to give someone a big gift, buy something expensive for yourself first. Never spend more on others than on yourself. If you don't want to have enemies, don't borrow money. And my mother often said, "Daughter, you're a redhead, and redheads are lucky with money. Take your chance." Always remember, money loves those who respect it, and she respected it. I never spent every last dollar, always had a stash, and put 10% of it away every month in a piggy bank. Another unpleasant confession awaited me at home. My husband had lent our daughter another $50,000 from our joint account and had forgotten to warn me. I started to argue. I rarely get angry, but this time he succeeded. But he interrupted me. "Enough, Alison, I'm leaving you. I met another woman. The earth has gone from under my feet. You wouldn't wish such a Thanksgiving even on your enemy." I'm Alison, yes, the redhead with a calculator for a spine and a memory that does not lose receipts. I turned 60 in May and celebrated by buying myself a pair of emerald earrings my mother would have called confidence you can clasp. Turns out, I need them. Nothing steadies a woman like a few carrots swinging near her pulse when the men at the table decide she's decorative. When I left the cemetery, I drove around the block twice, long enough to stop shaking and long enough to decide two things. 1. I would never again step into a room where my money was welcome but my voice was not. 2. I would stop treating my own good sense like it was impolite company. At home, I poured tea into the mug my daughter painted in 3rd grade crooked daisies, pink streaks, "Love you mom," then set it in the cabinet behind the stack of salad bowls where I wouldn't have to see the lie. I opened the file box I keep in the linen closet, behind the extra quilts, Lone Nora. Inside, a copy of the wire transfer for $100,000 dated last October, a text from her that read, "You're saving me, Mom. By summer I'll make it right," and an email thread scheduling a repayment plan she'd never signed because my printer's out of ink. I'd been polite. I'd been patient. I'd been a cautionary tale you watch on daytime court TV and yell at. I took out another folder labeled House Parents. That sale was my separate property. Every attorney blog in the universe had told me so as soon as I Googled, "Is inheritance mine or ours?" When the first rumblings of my husband's heroics with other people's cash started shaking the walls, I'd kept those funds separate on purpose. Not because I distrusted him, no, let's revise that. not only because I distrusted his impulse to buy lottery tickets the size of boats, but because my mother taught me to keep a purse within a purse. The inner zipper, the rainy day you never admit you counted. So when my husband Greg announced he'd lent our daughter $50,000 from our joint account and then announced, with the same breath, that he was leaving me for a woman named Bree, of course, the thing that cracked wasn't my sense of worth. It was a cigarette-thin thread holding together a version of me who apologizes before she exhales. Snap. Now you've met the other Alison, the one who reads terms and conditions for fun. I slept poor that night the way the truly betrayed do, with my eyes open and my jaw set. In the morning, I dialed a lawyer whose reviews mentioned the words forensic and unflappable. Her name was Patel. She sounded like a tuning fork, steady, clean, ringing with facts. Alison, she said after I summarized Thanksgiving in 3 crisp sentences. Stop talking to anyone about money unless it's me. Screenshot everything. Forward the wire transfer, the text, the emails, and go to the bank this afternoon. Freeze joint lines of credit. Ask for a printout of every transaction for the last 6 months. Bring a notebook. Bring patience. Can I bring a machete? I asked. You won't need one, she said, and I liked her even more for not laughing. Paper cuts are deadlier. At the bank, the manager tried the soft condescension they give women my age, but I wore my emeralds and my mother's voice and let the silence expand in the tiny office until he printed everything I asked for. The ledger was fluorescent with stupidity. In 3 months, Greg had withdrawn cash in round numbers that smelled like roulette. $600 here, $900 there, $1,200 when he was feeling lucky. He'd called them miscellaneous home expenses. Funny, our home had not received a single benefit from this miscellany. I opened a fresh account in my name, Alison S. Emergency reserve, and set up a transfer for my next pension deposit. Separate properties stayed separate. Paychecks that weren't separate became careful. I changed the auto pay on the mortgage to my new account and, per Miss Patel, set up a daily balance alert to my email, because trust is lovely on greeting cards but verification buys groceries. Back home, I brewed coffee and read. Then I wrote a demand letter. Firm, elegant, dated. Dear Nora, per our agreement on October 14th last year, you received a loan of $100,000 from me, your mother, Alison S., to be repaid by June 30th of this year. As of today's date, the amount remains unpaid. Please remit payment in full within 14 days or contact me to sign the attached repayment plan. Kindly note that failure to respond will result in further action. I attached a copy of the wire transfer and printed 2 versions, one for certified mail, one in case anyone ever asked, "Where are your manners?" I didn't send it that day. Not yet. Revenge without order is just yelling. I wanted choreography. Greg texted at noon. Staying at Tom's for a bit. Don't make this uglier than it needs to be. We can be adults. I looked at the photo he'd posted last week, him in a leather jacket purchased during the great midlife discounting, arms slung around a woman with white teeth and the kind of bangs you need confidence for. Bree apparently did brand consulting, which is a delicate way to say gives nouns to trouble. I replied, adult is a setting on a thermostat, not a personality. Return the house key. Your jacket is in the hall closet, the one that squeaks. He typed, stopped. Then, you always love to control things. I smiled because sometimes the truth rhymes. Yes, I wrote, like the steering wheel of a car. I did 3 things that afternoon that would change my winter. First, I drove to Nora's co-working space. The receptionist, a young man with a nose ring and a t-shirt that said Pay Creators, told me my daughter was heads down. I left an envelope with the demand letter, the repayment plan, and a post-it that reads, "You know what this is, Mom." Second, I called my son, Adam, the one who'd borrowed $2,000 in the winter and paid it back with interest because the math of respect always adds up. He didn't pick up. He called back 5 minutes later, voice worried. "Mom, you okay?" "Darling, I'm spectacular," I said, which was not true, but already beginning to be. After Thanksgiving? His voice tilted soft. and I heard his loyalty choose, and it chose me. I can come by tonight, tomorrow, I said. Bring your old toolbox. I think the front door wants to keep out wolves. Third, I went to the attic and pulled down 3 boxes labeled high school, dusty albums, ticket stubs, a class of '83 yearbook with my hair and argument with humidity. I wasn't looking for memory. I was looking for proof that I had been someone before I became an account number in other people's schemes. On the last page, a note in block letters. Alison, don't change your mind for anyone. Peter H. Peter had been the quiet one in physics, the boy who fixed everything with wire and patience, the one who walked me home from the winter dance when my date got sick drunk, the one I never kissed because life is a comedian. I smiled, then put the album back. I had worse to plan. Nostalgia could wait its turn. The certified mail receipt pinged my phone at 6. 10 minutes later, Nora's text lit the screen. I don't know what you think you're doing. This is harassment. You owe me support. Stop acting like a banker. You're my mother. I typed, deleted, typed again. I am your mother. That's why you're getting a chance to pay before a stranger asks you in a courtroom with echoing ceilings. 14 days, honey. I added a heart. Petty? Perhaps, but I learned from my mother that sugar in your tone doesn't mean sugar in your terms. At 7, Miss Patel called back. Also, she said, file a temporary restraining order on marital assets. In our state, once a divorce petition is filed, there's an automatic stay. Neither party can transfer, conceal, or borrow against property. If he's bleeding money at a casino, we dam the river. I haven't filed, I said slowly. You don't have to mean it to start it, she replied. You just have to be done pretending the house is Noah's Ark and he's the only one who can steer. I hung up and stood in the doorway of our not-for-long bedroom. The bed looked like it always had, too big to neatly made, as if I'd been rehearsing for a life that wanted an audience more than a partner. I took the framed wedding photo off the dresser and slid it behind the winter sweaters. Not to bury it, no, to keep it warm while I decided what it meant. Greg returned the key the next morning. He didn't ring. He tossed the ring to keys on a bottle opener into the mailbox and texted, done. Excellent. I preferred my thresholds unshared. That afternoon, a new message. Unknown number. He told me you're harassing his daughter. This isn't a good look. The signature, Bree. I sat at the kitchen table, set the phone down, and let myself laugh. A good look? I was a 60-year-old woman with emeralds at my throat and a ledger in my hand. I had graduated from caring about looks. Bree would learn the difference between branding and truth. One sells perfume, the other removes stains. I made a list and my neat, old-fashioned cursive revenge is better with bullet points. 1. Protect house. File, freeze, document. 2. Get money back. Demand, negotiate, pressure. 3. Teach daughter consequences. Not cruelty, but clarity with teeth. 4. Unmask husband's gambling. Not for sport, for witnesses. 5. Build a future that doesn't apologize for existing. I underlined the last one. Twice, on the 5th day after Thanksgiving, the weather broke into that thin sunlight that makes even poor decisions blush. Adam arrived with coffee and a hug that landed right in the center of me. I'm sorry I wasn't louder at dinner, he said into my hair. I was trying not to make it worse. You can't set a table for a fire and then blame the smoke, I said, because mothers are allowed metaphors. Before we replaced the deadbolt, rehung the squeaky closet door, and moved Greg's remaining TIs into a box labeled archive because I am nothing if not civilized. When we finished, Adam leaned against the wall, eyes tired. If you need me Christmas Eve, he said, I'll come. Ashley's got some party, but I can leave early. Come here instead, I said. We'll decorate the tree the way we like it, crooked. He grinned, a flash of the 8-year-old who once tried to hang a bowling trophy by dental floss. At noon, the doorbell rang. A courier handed me a glossy envelope addressed in breezy calligraphy. Inside, an invitation celebrate love. Greg and Bree, New Year's Day PM, the Lantern House. I laughed so hard I had to sit down. Bold of him to send me the time and place of his public relations disaster. I placed the invitation on the mantel, right between the ceramic reindeer and the photo of my mother teaching me how to count change with dimes lined up like soldiers. "Oh, I'll celebrate love," I told the reindeer. Mine. That night, I drafted my own invitation to myself. I opened my laptop and logged into the account. Greg didn't know I had the account where, for years, I had been salting away small amounts from my consulting work, the speaking gigs at community colleges where I taught young nurses how to read their pay stubs. The balance was comforting, not rich, not flashy, but loyal. Money, like people, tells you who loves you by how it behaves when nobody's watching. Then I began assembling a second folder, Greg evidence, screenshots of withdrawals, a copy of the joint credit line I'd frozen, notes from 2 neighbors who'd seen him stumble home after midnight with the bright eyes of a man who thinks probability is a pet he can train. I added a printout titled Gambling Addiction Resources because I am a redhead, not a monster. I slept that night like someone who'd put the monster under the bed on a payment plan. The next morning, Miss Patel called with the kind of calm that makes wolves sit. We filed. "You'll get the automatic injunction on assets by end of day. And Alison? If he drags you to mediation with that sunshine smile, take notes while he talks. Men in love with their myths always volunteer facts." "Thank you," I said. "How much do I owe you for the poetry?" She chuckled. "We'll bill hourly for the legal. The poetry is on the house." At lunch, I drove by the Lantern House to see where a woman might stand if she wanted a wedding to remember what truth sounds like under chandeliers. Good sight lines by the cake table, excellent acoustics by the bandstand, and bless the kind of podium where a guest could rest a manila folder without shaking. I ordered a coffee tipped well and told the universe I would not miss my cue. On the 8th day, Nora posted a photo, her at brunch, mimosa in hand, caption family over everything. Comments flooded in with hearts. I did not comment. I printed it and slid it into Lone Nora because jury's official or informal love a narrative arc. 2 days later, a courier arrived from her. A typed note that used the word gift 4 times. Cute. I placed it next to her original text thanking me for the loan. Words matter. My mother taught me that too. If money is language, interest is accent. I checked the calendar. 3 weeks until Christmas Eve. Plenty of time to decorate a tree with my son, freeze a few more accounts, and choose a dress that said I tried being quiet. It didn't fit. That evening, as twilight folded up the day, the house hummed with that particular dignity old houses have when they realize the woman inside them has remembered who she is. I made soup. I wrote lists. I took the emeralds off and placed them in their dish, where they winked like conspirators. And then, because every good plan deserves a symbol, I took the crooked 3rd-grade mug from behind the salad bowls and set it on the counter. I poured it full of water and dropped in a handful of peonies I'd bought myself. Crooked daisies, meet peonies. Childhood promise, meet adult proof. When my phone buzzed with a new message from a number I didn't recognize, I let it ring twice before I answered. "Alison? It's been a long time," the voice said, warm as cedar and familiar as the smell of a school gym after a winter dance. "It's Peter, Peter H. I heard about Greg. If you need anything repaired, lights, sockets, a soul, I'm on the same street these days." I looked at the attic boxes stacked by the stairs, at the yearbook waiting like a witness, and smiled without meaning to. "Funny you should call," I said. "I'm making a list." "Good," he replied. I brought a toolbox and a heart that doesn't scare easy. I hung up, leaned against the counter, and let the future step closer. 3 weeks, I told myself. A lawsuit with my name on it. A daughter about to learn the difference between mother and Matt. A husband rehearsing vows under a roof with excellent acoustics. And a man with a toolbox circling back to a girl he once walked home. I turned off the kitchen light and the house exhaled with me. Next, the decorations, the blackout, and a knock at the door that changed how I held December. The first Saturday of December arrived with sky the color of unspent nickels. I pulled the Christmas bins from the garage for red tubs, one labeled in my handwriting, "Do not let Greg streamline." Inside, the ornaments he called clutter, a nativity set carved by a neighbor in '92. Enough string lights to make the neighbors wonder if I was trying to flag down the International Space Station. I brewed cinnamon coffee and set Ella Fitzgerald low. If there is a sound for resilience, it's Ella turning sorrow into a trumpet. Adam came in, stamping the cold from his boots, cheeks flushed. He kissed the top of my hair like he'd been doing since he shot up past me in 9th grade. "Where do you want the tree, General?" "Front window," I said. "That way it can eavesdrop on the neighborhood." He lifted the spruce as if it weighed less than my patience and set it in the old metal stand Greg hated. I tightened the screws with a butter knife because sometimes women make do and it is gorgeous. We strung the first line of lights together, our hands working in that elegant, quiet choreography of people who've shared 1,000 breakfasts. "Mom," he said carefully, testing a bulb, "Ashley's doing Christmas Eve at her sister's this year. It could go late." But I told her. I touched his wrist. "Honey, if you want to be there, be there. I won't audition for Martyr." I smiled. "Come here first, decorate with me, then take your good heart to her." I refuse to be the woman who breeds guilt like poinsettias. He stared at me like he'd discovered a new continent. "You're sure?" "I am a lighthouse," I said. "Not a leash." He laughed, then his face tightened. "Nora texted me. Says you're making a spectacle out of Family Matters." "Family Matters," I repeated, rolling the words in my mouth like hard candy before spitting them into the trash. "She can call it a snowfall if she wants. It's still dead." We hung the crooked, beloved ornaments. The clay candy cane Adam made with 3 fingers and a stubborn tongue sticking out. The paper star that used to top the tree until it sagged like an old crown. A glass cardinal my mother swore brought luck. I told Adam about the injunction Miss Patel filed, about the new account, about the fact that money is a boundary in dollar bills. "Proud of you," he said, and we both pretended our eyes didn't burn. We stepped back to admire the tree. It leaned a little, like a dancer in mid-bow. "Perfect," I declared. We never trusted symmetrical people anyway. I plugged the lights into the outlet by the mantel. The tree blinked to life, golden, ridiculous, hopeful. I felt something in me rise to the surface, like cream deciding it will not be bullied into skim milk. "There," I said. "Proof that glow follows wiring." At 6, I reheated the soup and made grilled cheeses with a good cheddar because women who save for emergencies know when to splurge on bread. We ate at the coffee table like conspirators, ESPN murmuring about other men's messes in the background. At 8, I shooed him. "Go," I said. "Kiss your girl under a doorframe. Text me when you're home." He hesitated, then hugged me with that full-body sincerity only sons and good dogs possess. "You sure?" "I'm positive. I am going to make a list and drink cocoa aggressively. Try not to have too much fun." He left smiling, turning twice at the door as if I might change my mind and sprout neediness. I waved him off with the dish towel like a proud, bossy ship. Silence settled. The house creaked in the familiar places. I poured cocoa into the 3rd-grade Daisy mug, whipped cream like a snowdrift, cinnamon reckless on top. I opened my notebook and wrote in neat lines. "Confirm mortgage autopay switched order certified copy of deed. Mark as separate property follow up with Patel Ray. Discovery dress for Lantern House. Black suit. Emerald earrings. Find perfect envelope for a bank statement that will ruin a toast. The wind knows the windows." Somewhere a car door thunked. I stood to turn on the second set of lights for the banister and the house went black. No warning, no polite flicker, a full, hushed darkness, as if someone put a hand over the city's mouth. I stood very still and listened the way women learn to listen. Does the dark have a shape? Is there a man in it? Then the practical kicks in. The pilot lights, the breaker. I found the flashlight in the drawer labeled flashlight because I contain multitudes and also label makers. I crab-stepped to the basement and opened the breaker panel. One switch had tripped. I flipped it back. Nothing. The switch bit my finger like a gnat with feelings. I tried the kitchen outlet with the emergency radio. Dead. The neighborhood across the street glowed. I was the lone ship in a fog that hadn't gotten the memo. Either the lines into the house were cranky or the house had decided to rebel at last. I took a breath and remembered that as much as I love self-reliance, I do not perform electrical exorcisms. I scrolled through my phone. The electrician number I had saved, Dunstan Electric, looked like a typo. I hit call anyway. Dunstan, a voice answered, rough velvet. After hours call. What's up? Half the house lost power, I said. Outlets are dead, lights are out. My neighbors are lit up like Vegas, so it's not the grid. Name and address? I told him. He paused. Alison? On Beacon Street. Yes, it's Peter, he said, and everything in me steadied like a compass. Peter H. We went to school together. I just moved back onto Ridge. I do contract work for Dunstan sometimes. I can be there in 15. Life has a sense of timing that borders on smug. I'll put the flashlight in the window, I said. Follow the beacon. He arrived in 12 minutes because men with toolboxes and unfinished sentences move fast. I opened the door to a man built like a promise kept, broad-shouldered, hands competent, gray at the temples like a secret. He was wrapped in a navy work jacket, thermos-headed, toolbox in one hand, voltage meter in the other. When he smiled, the years fell away with a clatter I could almost hear. Hey, Red, he said softly, using the nickname 3 boys tried and only 1 earned. You still don't let the cold in. Only when it pays rent, I shot back and stepped aside. He took in the tree, the darkness, the single stubborn candle on the coffee table. You okay? I'm incandescent, I said. The house disagrees, he grinned, then got to work with the ritual attentiveness of someone tending an altar. Show me the panel in the basement. He studied the breakers, the main shutoff, the junction box. Looks like you've got a loose neutral on the service panel. And this, he tapped a cluster of wires, is mislabeled. Has it ever done this before? Not like this, I said. Though it has been known to sulk. He flicked his headlamp on. I had the indecent urge to touch the slant of his cheek where the beam softened it. Instead, I folded my arms and learned something new about wires because it's never too late to acquire fluency in anything. While he tightened connections and tested outlets upstairs, we talked about the years between then and now. He'd gone into the Navy, then apprenticed, then started his own company. Married once, widowed young. Rachel was a nurse, he said, voice steady. 10 years this spring. He didn't dramatize grief. He set it down on the table like a well-worn tool. I told him about the clinic, about teaching young nurses why their paychecks felt like riddles. I did not lead with divorce papers. I let them arrive like they do in real life, after you've already liked the person. When he asked, and Greg, his eyes were careful but not curious, gently alert. Leaving, I said. For a woman named after a weather system. He's getting married on New Year's Day. He blinked once. That is brisk. I admire the confidence of a man who schedules vows before the ink on his bank statements dries. He tightened one last screw. The house sighed. The lights came back like 1,000 little yeses. Try the outlets, he said. If they sing to you, I'm done. I tested one by the stove. The radio coughed to life with Bing Crosby in mid-swoon. The tree glowed like it had been practicing for this moment. I set the daisy mug back on the counter and exhaled. How much do I owe you? I asked, reaching for my wallet. He shook his head. Consider it my Merry Christmas to a girl who once helped me pass junior year English by explaining the difference between your and your like my life depended on it. Peter, I said, and let his name be both gratitude and a future habit. I tucked a folded bill into the pocket of his jacket anyway. He didn't argue. Men who know their price also know when to let a woman tip the universe. He poured himself a cocoa at my insistence. We stood by the window, watching the snow begin its slow, confident descent. He glanced at the mantel, at the invitation propped between reindeer like a challenge. You going? He asked. Oh, I am attending, I said. I've got a bank statement printed on ivory paper and a folder with tabs like a parade. I plan to hand the bride a truth she can't misplace. His mouth tilted. You always did your homework, Some men need a steady guide, I said. I am the spiral-bound sort. He laughed, then went quiet. Lantern House, he said after a moment, nodding at the card. I do maintenance there sometimes. Their sound system's good. Any microphone you find will make you invincible. You installed it? I asked. Upgraded it last spring. The acoustics in that east room? Perfect. To the point of brutal. Well then, I said, I'll stand in the brutal. He looked at me with a respect that made my throat tight. If you want a second set of eyes on any displays, I can help. He held up his hands, palms calloused. I mean the literal kind. Lighting, sound. Not that you need help, everybody needs a good crew, I said. Even the ringmaster. He made to leave, then paused by the door. Alison? Yes, I keep thinking about what it took for you to call, he said, and what it took for me to answer. Feels like a breaker flipped in the last 30 minutes that has nothing to do with wiring. I swallowed and decided to become the kind of woman who answers possibility without blushing. It does, I said. You free Christmas Eve? If the house tries the tricks again, I want someone who knows where the fuse box and the cocoa live. He smiled, all the way up to his eyes. I'll be around. When the door closed, I felt the house expand, as if relieved I'd finally invited in someone who didn't require instructions. I turned off the overheads, leaving only the tree and the halo it threw on the ceiling. I sat with my notebook and made a new list titled Peter. It had 2 bullet points, kind and competent. I circled both and drew a star, because it is both petty and perfect to enjoy being 60 and still drawing stars for boys you like. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. You think you're clever. You won't ruin our day. Bree, trying on menace-like a dress she didn't buy. I typed, days rarely belong to people. They belong to truths. See you January 1st. Then, because I am my mother's daughter, I added a money bag emoji. Petty? Absolutely. But revenge without wit is just work. The next morning, certified mail green cards began to return like pigeons. Nora had signed. Her signature looked like someone trying on a future that didn't fit. Miss Patel emailed, "We're moving into Discovery. Subpoena to the casino issued. Also, a hearing on the injunction is set for December 23rd. Be prepared to be charming and stern. Bring your documentation." That afternoon, Adam stopped by with a wreath. Ashley says hi, he said, tucked it on the door. He noticed the new light in the hallway, the way the outlets looked less haunted. House behaving? Impeccably, I said. I had help. Who? Peter H. He snapped his fingers. From Ridge? The one who used to fix Mrs. Downes's toaster for free. The very one. I kept my tone casual, like a woman who isn't suddenly interested in learning how circuits woo each other. He grinned. Good guy. He came by the bar once with his crew, tipped like he meant it. You should. He stopped himself, studied my face. You did? Good. We set a date. Christmas Eve at my place, p.m., hot cocoa, Ella, reckless garland. Then he was gone again, off to be young and uncomplicated in a world that had not yet sharpened all its corners. I spent the next week moving like the general of a kind army. I baked 2 pies because sugar can coexist with subpoenas. I labeled every folder with a date. I found the dress a dark green suit that respected my clavicles and could carry a microphone without blinking. I practiced what I would say if the bride asked me how I knew, because banks date things and men don't. On December 23rd, the hearing, beige carpet, fluorescent lights, a judge whose eyes suggested she'd seen 1,000 husbands invent the weather. Greg sat 2 rows ahead with Bree, who wore white to court as if costumes could sway gravity. Miss Patel was winter sleek. We presented transaction printouts timed to casino debit machines. We presented the loan documentation to Nora, the wire, the text. The judge signed the injunction with the sigh of a woman refilling a bird feeder. Routine, necessary, vaguely amused by squirrels. Outside, Bree leaned in close so only I could hear. You're cruel. No, sweetheart, I said, soft as a mitten. I'm precise. Greg reached for her elbow, eyes on me, jaw a punctuation mark that's rarely used correctly. You'll regret this, he muttered. Regret is for things I didn't do, I said. This is a highlight reel. Christmas Eve arrived on a wind that had opinions. Adam came at 6 with cinnamon sticks and the good bourbon, kissed my cheek, and slung the string of popcorn garland across the tree with athletic irresponsibility. We sang along to Ella badly on purpose. At 8:15, I pressed a Tupperware into his hands. Go, I said. I refuse to be the story Ashley tells her sister about lonely mothers and their vacant stares. He squeezed my shoulders. Text me if you need anything. I have a flashlight and a man with a headlamp, I said. We'll be fine. He laughed, kissed my temple, and was gone, leaving the warm pocket of his presence in the air like a held note. I stood in the living room with the lights low and the tree doing its best impression of a small miracle. Snow began again, light and conspiratorial. I took the daisy mug, the cinnamon, the bourbon this time because even lighthouses indulge once a year, and settled on the couch with my notebook. The lights flickered once, then twice. I frowned, set the mug down. The house went still in that suspended way right before something gives. I said out loud, to no one and also to my mother, not tonight. The lights died. I stared into the sharp velvet dark for a heartbeat too. Then I smiled, because some cues are not requests. I picked up my phone and pressed the number I had saved as Peter Wiring Other. Back again? He said, voice like logs catching. It appears I have made a new tradition, I answered. Can you come? Already in the truck, he said. I was heading past your block anyway. Well then, I said, and walked to the front door to set the flashlight in the window, a little star to steer by. Let's see what else wants to turn back on. Snow muffled the world that night like God had thrown a quilt over everything noisy. I stood by the window, the flashlight glowing weakly on the sill, casting long shadows of the ornaments on my wall, warped reflections of the life I'd lived, the people who had feasted on my kindness like it was a buffet. Then, headlights curved into my driveway. His truck, the old Chevy, hummed steady, no nonsense, and the man who stepped out was cut from the kind of cloth the world's short on, worn, but not worn out. Peter stomped snow from his boots and gave a small wave before I'd even opened the door. Well, I said, if the power goes out every time I'm alone on Christmas Eve, I might start calling the electric company romantic. He smiled, the half-smile men wear when they've known real grief. I think your house just knows when it's time for company. He stepped in, bringing with him that crisp scent of cold air and oil, a whisper of cedar, and a hum of quiet competence. He brushed the snow off his jacket before walking straight toward the panel like a man who knew his business and didn't need to explain himself. It's funny, he said, flipping open the cover. Electricity's a jealous thing. It always wants a clean connection. You get one bad wire, and it won't share current with anyone else. I leaned on the doorframe, watching him work. Sounds a lot like my family, he chuckled, low and easy. So the current's not flowing there either? Oh, it's flowing, I said, just in the wrong direction. Straight out of my bank account. He looked back at me then, flashlight balanced between his teeth, and grinned around it. It was impossible not to grin back. When the breaker flipped and the house bloomed back to life, warm, golden, grateful, I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. You always had timing, I said. You showed up with jumper cables when my first car died, too. And you showed up with a thermos of cocoa when I missed the bus, he said. Seems we take turns rescuing each other. Well, I said, I'm not planning on stopping now. He finished the work, then followed me into the living room where the tree glowed again. It leaned, proudly imperfect. That's your touch, he said. Always a little tilt, but somehow the right one. I poured cocoa, spiked lightly with bourbon, into two mismatched mugs. One was the daisy mug, hers, mine, my daughter's once, now reclaimed. I handed it to him. This one has history. Don't break it. He took it reverently. Feels like an heirloom. It survived 20 years of dishwashers and one Thanksgiving explosion, I said. It's practically immortal. He smiled again, but softer this time, the kind that reached the corners of his eyes. He sat down beside the tree, cross-legged like a boy. Tell me something, Red. Why are you alone tonight? I sipped the cocoa and thought about how to answer. Because I got tired of pretending bad behavior is family tradition. Because my daughter thinks love means entitlement. My husband thinks vows are suggestions. And my silence started to feel like consent. I needed quiet more than company. Peter nodded slowly. Silence is cheaper than divorce, but it costs more in the long run. Wise man, I said. You always were, he shrugged. No, just a man who's blown a few fuses and learned to check the wiring first. We sat for a while, sipping, watching the snow. The world outside seemed suspended, as if time had paused just to listen in. Then softly he said, You know, I used to think about you. I turned my head, pretending to be surprised, though something deep inside me already knew. Used to? Well, he said, still do apparently. He took a deep breath. In high school, you were sunlight with freckles. You'd come into physics class late, hair a mess, and still correct the teacher. You never noticed, but every time you brushed chalk off your fingers, I thought, if I could just hold her hand once, maybe I'd believe in luck. I smiled, eyes stinging more than the bourbon deserved. Peter Holcomb, you always were a poet disguised as a plumber, electrician, he corrected. But yeah, I dabble. I laughed, then a real laugh, one that came from somewhere deep, untouched by the betrayal of recent months. It startled me, the sound of my own joy sneaking out like a thief. When the laughter faded, the quiet between us felt thick but not awkward. He was looking at me the way men used to, before I became the woman who balanced checkbooks and held families together like duct tape. And I realized I wasn't invisible. Not tonight. The clock on the mantel ticked softly. I thought about Adam, probably laughing with his girlfriend's family. About Nora, somewhere between denial and disdain, drunk on her own righteousness. About Greg, probably practicing his devoted husband act for Bree under the twinkle lights of some rental venue. I raised my cup. To fresh starts, he clinked his mug against mine. To reconnected circuits, we drank, and for a brief moment, the air hummed alive, charged, waiting. Then my phone buzzed. It was Adam. Merry Christmas, Mom. Love you. Thanks for making me who I am. I typed back, love you too, sweetheart. You're the best thing I ever created without a manual. Peter leaned over, reading upside down. Good kid. The best, I said. He knows right from wrong, and from now on, he's going to know that his mother stood up for herself, not just him. He smiled. Sounds like you're already standing tall. I met his gaze. And maybe ready to dance again. He tilted his head, eyes glinting. I do know a little music wiring trick. Want to test your luck? He reached into his pocket, pulled out his phone, and connected it to my speaker system. Nat King Cole filled the room, velvet smooth, rich as chocolate. He stood, offered me his hand. Come on, Red. You can't fix everything, but you can sway. I hesitated for half a second, the old voice in my head whispering dignity, restraint, control, and then I told that voice to take the night off. I took his hand. His palm was warm, solid, familiar. We danced right there in the living room, surrounded by half-wrapped gifts, snow reflecting off the window, the tree twinkling like it approved. His arm around me was steady, no demands, no games, just presence. When the song ended, he didn't let go immediately, and neither did I. You deserve peace, Alison, he said. Not just a victory. Peace, I plan to have both, I said, smiling up at him. Peace in the bank and victory in heels, he laughed. Now that sounds like the woman I remember. Outside, the snow deepened, and inside, the current between us hummed steady and true. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't just surviving the night, I was living it. We talked until midnight about everything and nothing. About his late wife and my mother. About the smell of old school gyms, the sweetness of payback, and how sometimes the best revenge is simply building a life that no one thought you could. When he finally stood to leave, I walked him to the door. He hesitated, looking down at me. You sure you'll be all right tonight? I'm 60, I said, and I have good locks, good bourbon, and a better electrician. I'll be fine, he smiled, brushing a bit of hair from my face. Call me if the lights even think about flickering. I watched his truck until its taillights vanished into the white. Then I turned off all the lamps except the tree and sat in the soft glow, listening to the hum of the restored power steady, loyal, alive. For the first time in months, I didn't feel broken or owed or wronged. I felt charged. And somewhere, beneath all that snow, the ground shifted just a little but enough to promise that when the new year came, I wouldn't be the same woman walking into it. I smiled, whispered to the quiet house, let's see what you've got next. January 1st dawned like a dare, cold and sharp, the kind of morning that either makes you repent or reload. I chose reload. I woke before sunrise and brewed coffee strong enough to wake the ancestors. The house was still, the tree now slightly wilted but still holding its own just like me. The snow outside had iced over into a glittering sheet, smooth and merciless. Fitting, I thought. Today was a day for polished surfaces and hard truths. I opened my closet and surveyed the troops. Velvet, silk, wool. The black suit hung there like a quiet accomplice. Tailored, sleek, unbothered. It didn't scream. It whispered competence. I paired it with the emerald earrings, my talismans, and a single silver brooch in the shape of a lightning bolt. I didn't choose it for subtlety. On the vanity, I placed 3 items. My lipstick, deep wine, not red is passion, but wine is patience rewarded, a folder labeled evidence, and a crisp envelope embossed with the logo of First Meridian Bank. Inside it, the bank statement that would strike like a well-aimed dart. Greg's overdrafts, casino withdrawals, 2 loans denied. His finances were less man of means and more man of delusion. I tucked the envelope into my handbag like it was an invitation to redemption. By 10, the world was awake and pretending to be hopeful. My phone buzzed, a text from Adam. You sure you want to go? I smiled. Honey, when you've spent decades funding other people's bad decisions, you earn the right to attend their premieres, he replied with a single emoji. That boy got my sense of timing. I drove to the Lantern House slowly, letting the radio hum old Sinatra through the cold. The venue rose ahead like a glass palace for people who mistake chandeliers for character. White roses, white ribbons, white lies. I parked near the back where the caterer smoked and the truth often hides. Inside, it was warm and perfumed with something expensive that wanted to be forgiveness. Brie had done well. The decor was tasteful, the tables gleamed, and there were enough mirrors to make Narcissus weep. The guests looked up as I entered. Some knew me, some only knew the story. Faces softened, stiffened, whispered. I walked with purpose, heels steady, chin lifted. The emeralds winked under the chandelier like co-conspirators. Greg was by the altar, rehearsing his smile. He looked thinner, restless. Brie hovered near him, flawless in white satin, her beauty too symmetrical to be kind. When she saw me, her jaw twitched. Alison, she said, approaching with a tremor of practiced civility. I didn't think you'd actually come. Oh, I wouldn't miss this, I said lightly. It's not every day a woman gets to attend her own retirement party. Greg's best man, some golfing friend whose name I never cared to learn, let out a nervous laugh, then stopped when I looked at him. Alison, Greg began, voice tight. This isn't the time. Every time is the time when debt's involved, I said, slipping off my gloves with slow precision. But don't worry, I won't upstage the bride. I just have a small gift for her. I stepped closer to Brie, my heels clicking like a metronome of composure. I handed her the ivory envelope. For you, dear. You're marrying into a legacy. She took it uncertain and slid out the paper. Her face drained of color. She read the numbers, the overdrafts, the gambling transactions, the lines of credit denied. What is this? She whispered. Your husband's vows, I said. In numbers, they're honest, at least. He may promise love, but the bank has already said insufficient funds. Gasps flitted through the crowd like startled birds. Someone dropped a champagne flute. It didn't break, but the sound was perfect punctuation. Greg's face flushed a dangerous red. You came here to humiliate me? I tilted my head. No, darling. I came to enlighten her. Humiliation is just a side effect of truth. Bree turned to him, trembling. Is this true? Did you hide this from me? He tried to recover, but the man had the poker face of a toddler. It's exaggerated. Alison's just bitter exaggerated, I cut in. You emptied our joint savings to feed a casino's light bill, Greg. The injunction froze what's left. The bank knows. So does the IRS. And now, so do your wedding guests. Bree's lips trembled. You told me you were paying off the mortgage. Oh, he paid, I said. Just not ours. The officiant, poor man, cleared his throat like someone trying to restore order in a thunderstorm. Perhaps we should continue, I said pleasantly. A marriage should start with full transparency, don't you agree? Bree's mother rose from her seat, face pale with the realization that her daughter was about to marry a financial black hole. She whispered something to Bree, who nodded, then turned back to Greg. Don't, she said. Just don't. She walked off, heels echoing down the aisle, veil trailing like surrender. The guests murmured, phones subtly rising. Greg stood there, jaw slack, face unraveling. I reached into my bag again and pulled out another envelope, this one addressed to Greg's court summons. I held it out to him. Since we're all here and dressed for the occasion, consider this your official notice. Divorce proceedings begin Monday. You can keep the tux. You'll need something formal to wear when your creditors call. He didn't take it. I dropped it neatly at his feet. Congratulations, Greg. You finally made an honest man out of yourself by accident. Then I turned, thanked the stunned officiant for his time, and walked out. Outside, the cold hit like applause. Snow swirled in bright confetti. I inhaled deeply, the air clean and sharp enough to taste. I didn't feel triumphant exactly. I felt aligned, like the universe had just adjusted its shoulders. My phone buzzed. It was Miss Patel. Heard you went. How'd it go? I texted back, like poetry with better lighting. She sent a laughing emoji, followed by, the injunction held. His accounts are frozen. You're protected, protected. The words settled in my chest like heat. I walked to my car and sat for a long moment before turning the key. The engine hummed to life, steady, cooperative, nothing like the chaos I'd just left behind. Halfway home, I stopped at a diner I hadn't visited in years, the kind of place where the waitress calls you honey and means it. I ordered a slice of pecan pie and coffee, both black and unapologetic. As I ate, I caught sight of my reflection in the window. A woman who had walked through humiliation, betrayal, and loss and somehow came out gleaming. Not young, not untouched, but damn near luminous. My mother's voice floated up in my head. Money loves those who respect it. Well, Mama, I said quietly, raising my fork, I respect the hell out of it now. The bell above the diner door jingled. I didn't have to turn to know who it was. His footsteps had the same cadence as they did in 1983. Thought I might find you here, Peter said, sliding into the booth opposite me. His jacket smelled faintly of snow and metal and something solid. How? I asked, though I already knew. News travels fast in small towns, he said. And your entrance made quite a sound. I wasn't planning to trend, I said. He grinned. Oh, red. Some people start fireworks. You are fireworks, I laughed, surprising myself again. You should have seen their faces. I did, he said, pulling out his phone. Someone uploaded the video already, I groaned. God, I hope I looked good. You look like a woman who finally turned the lights back on. He ordered coffee, and we sat there, two people with miles of past and maybe an inch of future, letting the moment breathe. When the waitress brought the check, he reached for it. I reached faster. Don't start, he said. Peter, I said, smiling. My ex owes me $150,000. I can afford coffee, he laughed, shaking his head. You've always been dangerous when you're free. I looked out the window at the snow thickening again. Maybe it's time I stopped being afraid of that. Good, he said softly. Because freedom looks damn good on you. Outside, the storm quieted to a hush. I realized I didn't feel alone anymore, not in the sad, empty way, but in the strong, open way. The kind of alone that feels like a clean page. When he walked me to my car, he paused, brushing the snow off my windshield with his gloved hand. "You did something brave today," he said. "No," I said. "I did something overdue." He smiled, nodded, and leaned in just enough to press a kiss to my cheek, steady, sure, and warm enough to melt the edge of winter. As he walked back to his truck, I whispered into the cold, "Now that's the kind of interest I don't mind collecting." The new year had begun, and for the first time in a long, long time, I wasn't looking back. There's a peculiar quiet that follows victory. Not the peaceful kind, no, the sort that hums like an appliance still plugged in. It was the morning after the wedding fiasco, and my phone was already doing its best impression of a beehive. Missed calls from Greg, 2 texts from Bree, the first full of fire, the second oddly polite. "I didn't know. Thank you for showing me before I signed my life away." One from my lawyer, Ms. Patel. "The press has picked up the Lantern House incident. You've been described as composed, unflappable, and devastatingly factual." And my favorite from Adam, "Mom, you're trending. #thank you, Alison. I brewed my coffee strong and black, just the way independence tastes. Sitting in my kitchen, I scrolled through the online clips of myself standing at that altar, black suit gleaming, voice steady, emerald earrings winking like punctuation marks on truth. The comments section was a circus. Half the people cheered, the other half clutched their pearls, but I wasn't angry at the spectacle. I was entertained. I'd spent a lifetime avoiding scenes, and now that I'd made one, I couldn't help thinking, well, that's one for the memoir. I went to the window and looked out at the clean winter morning. The snow had settled on the mailbox like a crown. I smiled. "Queen of common sense," I muttered to myself. "Long may she reign." That's when my phone rang again. It was Peter. "You alive?" he asked, voice warm as sunlight through blinds. "Alive, caffeinated, and scandalous," I said. "You? Half the county's electricians are replaying your video on break. You've become a folk hero. Wonderful. Maybe I'll start charging for autographs." He chuckled. "You might. I know a guy who could build you a sign. Justice done here. Cash only." I laughed so hard I nearly spilled my coffee. "Peter, that might actually be my next business." "Careful," he said. "I might take you seriously." I let that hang in the air a second longer than necessary. "Then, you free later?" I was thinking of some house repairs, emotional and electrical. He didn't hesitate. "I'll bring my toolbox and a sense of humor by afternoon." He was at my door again, sleeves rolled up, that easy grin that could thaw February. I'd made soup, the kind that fills a house with patience. While he rewired the faulty hallway light, I worked at the table, surrounded by folders, loan recovery, divorce settlement, business ideas. I was sorting through them like a woman rebuilding a kingdom brick by brick. "You're planning something," he said, not looking up. "You get that squint when you're dangerous." "I'm thinking of teaching a class," I said, "at the community center. Financial self-defense for women over 50. No jargon, no nonsense. Real stories, real tools." He smiled. "That sounds like you." "I'm tired of watching women trust men more than math," I said. "If I can save one woman from a shared credit line with a gambler, I'll consider it charity work." He looked at me a long moment, then went back to his wiring. "You know, I could help. I can fix more than circuits." "Peter," I said, "are you volunteering to teach life skills or applying for the position of moral support?" "Whichever pays in soup," he said, eyes twinkling. I laughed. "Then you're overqualified." By sunset, the lights glowed perfect, steady, warm, obedient. The house felt more alive than it had in months. Maybe it wasn't just the wiring. After dinner, I opened my laptop and started designing a flyer. "Take Back Your Balance, a workshop with Alison S." Below that, "Learn the practical art of saying no, reading fine print, and saving your own damn life." Peter leaned over my shoulder, reading aloud. "You sure about that tagline?" "Oh, absolutely. You want polite, you call a priest. You want results, you call me." He grinned. "Red, you could run for mayor. God forbid, I said. I prefer smaller miracles, ones with spreadsheets. He poured 2 glasses of wine, and we sat on the couch, watching the snow tap the window. It was quiet, but not the lonely kind. It was the quiet of 2 people who had stopped pretending life was supposed to be predictable. You know, I said after a while, I didn't expect to meet someone new at 60, especially not someone who knows how to fix a light and a mood in the same hour. He looked at me with that soft steadiness that made me feel 20 and timeless all at once. I didn't expect to get a second chance either. There was a long pause where the world seemed to wait for something. Then he reached for my hand. His touch was warm, unhurried, honest. Outside, the snow deepened, a slow accumulation of grace. The weeks that followed moved with the rhythm of rebuilding. The divorce finalized quickly. Greg, it turned out, was more eager to run than to fight once the financial evidence surfaced. Miss Patel handled everything with her trademark surgical precision. You're solvent, protected, and unencumbered, she said on the phone. That's lawyer speak for you. One. Nora stayed silent for a while, which suited me fine. But then one afternoon, I received an email with the subject line, "I'm sorry." It was short, just 5 sentences. She said she'd been angry, scared, and spoiled. She admitted she'd lied to save face, that she hadn't realized how deeply she'd wounded me. She ended with, "I'll start repaying next month, not because of the law, because I finally understand what I owe you." I read it twice, then once more, for the miracle of it. I didn't reply right away, not because I was cold, but because I'd learned that forgiveness, like interest, compounds best with time. Instead, I forwarded the email to Adam. He replied, "Knew she'd get there. You raised her right, even if it took her a decade to show it." That night, Peter came over with a small bouquet of daisies, the same kind painted on that old mug. "For luck," he said, placing them in a glass jar. "Redheads don't need luck," I said. "We make our own." He laughed. "Then maybe it's for company." We cooked together, him chopping onions like an amateur, me pretending not to enjoy watching him try. We talked about everything from high school to heartbreak to the absurdity of adult children. At one point, he looked around the house and said, "Feels different in here." "Like the air's lighter." "It is," I said. "It's what happens when you clear out ghosts and bad investments." He nodded. "Then keep going. Whatever this is, it suits you." By February, the workshop had taken off. Women from all over the county came to hear me talk about money, marriage, and self-respect. I told them the truth with humor, like medicine hidden in chocolate. I'd start each session the same way. "Ladies, a budget isn't a prison. It's a map. And if a man ever tells you not to worry about money, worry immediately." They laughed, but they listened. Some took notes, others just sat, eyes bright with the kind of recognition that comes before revolution. After each class, a few would linger, sharing stories of debts, divorces, second chances. I'd listen, nod, and remind them, "You're not powerless. You're just underinformed. And that's fixable." It became more than a class. It became a movement. One evening, after everyone left, I found Peter sitting in the back of the empty community hall, arms crossed, smiling. "You've got a room full of women who'd follow you into battle," he said. "Battle?" I laughed. "Honey, this is better. We're winning without firing a shot." He stood, walking toward me. "You ever stop to realize what you've built?" I looked around at the tables, the posters, the stack of sign-up sheets. "A beginning," I said. "That's all I ever wanted. Again, a clean start." He took my hand then, not tentative but sure. "Then here's to beginnings." And when he kissed me, it wasn't cinematic, it was real, warm, grounded, the kind of kiss that says, "You're safe now." For the first time since everything fell apart, I believed it. Later that night, I sat by the window again, watching the moonlight fall across the snow. My house was quiet, my bank account balanced, my heart strangely at ease. There was no thunderclap, no dramatic ending. Just peace, the kind that takes its time to arrive, but stays once it does. I lifted my old daisy mug, now full of tea, and whispered, "Here's to the rebuild." The lights flickered once, like a wink, then stayed steady. It's funny how calm looks different when you've earned it. For years, I thought calm was silence or the absence of trouble. Now I know it's the sound of something steady humming in the background, like a home that's finally repaired its wiring. It was late March when I realized the hum had become music. The snow had melted into shy puddles, and the first crocuses were peeking through, stubborn and purple, like little protesters refusing to quit. I just finished the last class of my financial workshop, 20 women, all over 50, all laughing like they just remembered they had teeth. Afterward, one of them, a gray-haired firecracker named June, hugged me so tight my bones creaked. "You changed my life, Alison," she said. "I opened my first savings account today. In my name." "Good," I told her, smiling. "Name it after yourself. That way you'll never forget who it belongs to." She laughed, wiped a tear, and said, "You ought to be on TV." "God forbid," I said. They couldn't handle the lighting I demand. When I locked up the community center that night, I stood under the streetlight and felt something quiet but powerful move through me. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was multiplying. The next morning, Adam showed up unannounced, carrying a big paper bag that smelled suspiciously like my favorite bakery. "Good morning, financially ferocious mother," he said, kissing my cheek. "You're famous. Someone from the Post Courier called me asking for an interview with you." I groaned. "They want the scandal, not the substance, Mom. They want the woman who turned revenge into a masterclass," he said, handing me a pastry. "Own it." I bit into a croissant so buttery it nearly qualified as sin. "I suppose I could let them talk to my publicist." "You don't have one, then I'll invent one. Her name will be Donna, and she'll only answer the phone after noon." He laughed. "You're unstoppable." I looked at him, the same brown eyes he had when he was 6, and built a fort out of my sofa cushions. "You know, I think I finally stopped expecting people to rescue me." He smiled. "You didn't need rescuing. You just needed remembering." We spent the rest of the morning fixing my porch railing and talking about everything and nothing. At one point, I caught him watching me with that quiet admiration only a son who's seen his mother get back up can have. It filled me with a kind of pride no award could match. When he left, I made him take a container of stew and a check for the $2,000 he'd borrowed years ago. "Mom, no," he said, shaking his head. "Humor me," I said. "I'm allergic to unpaid debts, even in reverse." He hugged me hard. "You're the strongest woman I know." "Of course I am," I said. "I raised you." That evening, the doorbell rang. Peter stood there, holding a small brown box. "You're early," I said. "Dinner's not even dramatic yet," he grinned. "This isn't dinner, it's a surprise." Inside the box was a vintage metal sign, polished and painted with care. It read, "Alison's Law. If you want peace, pay your debts. If you want freedom, earn it. If you want light, fix the damn wiring." I laughed until I nearly cried. "Peter, that's your motto," he said. "For the workshop, for your house, for your life." I ran my fingers over the letters. "You know, if I weren't already too old for grand gestures, I'd kiss you for this." "You're not too old," he said quietly. "You're just on time." I looked up at him, then really looked. His hair had gone more silver than gray, his face mapped with the kind of lines that told stories rather than hid them. He wasn't dazzling, but he was solid, dependable. The kind of man who fixed things instead of breaking them. "Stay for dinner," I said. "I made stew." "The kind that forgives nobody." He laughed. "I'm in." After we ate, we sat by the fire. The world outside had that hushed blue glow that only early spring evenings get. I told him about the class, about Nora's first repayment 5. "Oh, a wire to my account with the note installment 1. Progress," he said. "Miracle," I corrected. "She even called me last week. Said she's seeing a therapist about her money habits. Apparently entitlement's treatable." He chuckled. "And Greg? Rumor has it he's moved to Nevada." Irony's not lost on me. He raised an eyebrow. "You miss him?" "Like I miss dial-up internet," I said. "No, Peter. I don't miss men who gamble with other people's hope." He reached over, brushed a stray hair off my cheek. Then what about men who fix the fuse box and bring flowers? Oh, those, I said, smiling. Those I might consider keeping around. He took my hand, then steady, deliberate. No rush, no pretense. Just a simple truth between two people who'd lived long enough to recognize it. I never stopped thinking about you, Red, he said softly, even when I thought I'd never see you again. I squeezed his hand. Well, next time don't wait 40 years. I've got a good decade left, and I intend to enjoy every watt of it. He laughed, then leaned in and kissed me. It wasn't fireworks this time. It was warmth, continuity, a current that didn't need sparks to prove it was alive. Weeks passed, and life fell into rhythm. I taught my classes, balanced my books, and learned to rest without guilt. Peter and I took to meeting every Sunday morning for coffee at the diner. We talked about everything from wiring to forgiveness. Sometimes he'd reach across the table and trace his finger over my palm, saying, "You still run hot," and I'd reply, "Electricity, Peter. Once you learn how to conduct it, it never leaves you." One night, after a class, I walked home to find the porch light flickering. For a moment, my stomach sank, old reflex. Then I smiled. "Don't you dare," I told the bulb. I reached up, tapped it once with my finger, and it steadied. The light held. Inside, I poured myself a glass of wine, lit a candle, and pulled out my mother's old photograph, the one of her standing in front of her tiny shop, apron tied proud, hair in a no-nonsense bun. "You were right, Mama," I whispered. "Money loves those who respect it, and life loves those who don't give up on themselves." The candle flame bent a little, like an answer. I thought of all the women in my class, of my daughter paying her debts, my son building his own life, of Peter's laugh in my kitchen. I thought of the girl I used to be, the redhead with a savings envelope in her sock drawer, scared of making anyone angry. And I raised my glass to her. "You made it," I said. "And you did it without losing your shine." Outside, the wind rattled softly against the window, but the house didn't flinch. The light stayed on, steady as my own heartbeat. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for anything to collapse. I had rebuilt everything that mattered: my home, my self-respect, my freedom, and somewhere along the way, love found its way back in, quiet and real. I finished my wine, turned off the lamp, and let the darkness settle gently around me. Not menacing this time, not empty, just peace. Because when you've learned to make your own light, the night is never the enemy.